So, for a very long time, I've had a very bad habit. And I've had this habit since I was a little boy growing up in a little ramshackle white house in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, living with my grandparents, Booker and Blanche Skull. Every morning, my grandmother would get up and tiptoe around the house and make a hot breakfast for me and then walk me to the bus stop and see me off to school. But before she did that, she would actually get up even earlier and make a hot breakfast for my grandfather. And I know from watching him other days of the week that he would pour the milk into his coffee and then pour the coffee onto a saucer so it would cool more quickly. And then he would slurp the coffee directly from the saucer. And then he'd get up and he'd go out to the green station wagon. And with the keys in his left hand, he would reach across the steering wheel and put the keys into the ignition on the right side and turn the car on. And still with the left hand, he'd shift the shifter into drive, always with the left hand. Why? Because he had no right hand. His right hand had been mangled and ripped off in a farming accident years prior. But that didn't stop him. With just that one good hand, he learned to write with that hand. He learned to tie his shoes with just the one hand. He did everything that a man could do with just that left hand. And so he'd drive himself to work every morning to the meat packing plant where, with his one hand, just as good as the other men, he would pack the sausages and the hot dogs so he could bring home the bacon, forgive the pun, and he would take care of us financially. And he did this with just one hand. But then on the weekends, when someone needed to work on the ramshackle house to keep it not leaking with the roof and not falling down, he would do that. And sadly, his grandson was a bookish knucklehead, so I didn't actually offer meaningful help. If he needed real help with the work around the house, he called on my Uncle Robert. But I would still stand there beside him at the base of the ladder, holding and handing up things as he needed them. And he would climb the ladder with nails clenched between his teeth and get to the top. And he would take out one nail, and with this sinewy, muscular left arm, he would get the nail started just with brute force. And then in the way that you might use your thumb and index finger on the opposite hand to hold the nail, he would simply place his nub against the side of the nail to steady it. And with the hammer, with aim that was true, he would drive the nail in. And his aim was always perfect. He never managed to bend a nail. And his aim was true when he went hunting, not with me because I was a knucklehead, bookish kid, but he would go with his hunting buddies and brace the butt of the shotgun against his left shoulder and look down the barrel. And with true aim, he would find a way to bring back squirrels and rabbits for dinner. On Saturday nights, he would shine his shoes until they were brilliant. And then on Sunday morning, we'd all get up, put on our Sunday best, and go to church. Grandma would sit proudly in the front row along with the deaconesses, and Grandpa would sit along with the rest of the deacons just at the base of the pulpit. And then just before the sermon, every few weeks when it was his turn among the deacons, he would sit up a little bit straighter than normal. And I don't know if he took hold of something or if something took hold of him, but he would open his mouth, and then all of us in the congregation would hear something to the effect of this: I love the Lord, he heard my cries. And we would respond in kind, singing the same verse back to him, a little slower and a little more loudly, and then he'd call out the second verse, and we would answer in kind. And then the third and the fourth and final verse would proceed with the same call and response format. And we were making a joyful noise together, and we made noise together because, with all due respect, we were not white Methodists whose minister might deliver what my grandmother would call a lecture. We were Black Baptists. Our preacher preached, and when he preached, the house rocked and rolled. And before he preached, one of the deacons would, in that manner that I just demonstrated, get us all rocking and rolling. And every few weeks when it was his turn, my grandfather was at the center of it. But then when the day was done, whether it was the end of the day having been at the meatpacking plant or working on the roof or leading the church, we'd all go and settle in on the comfort of the screened-in front porch Grandma and Grandpa would sit down in their chairs, and I would sit on the floor at their feet. And as Grandpa settled into his chair, he would always make this noise. Whoosh, and it was as if all of the day's stresses were expelled in one cleansing breath. And he would take out the Carter Hall pouch, and he would take out his pipe, and he would pack the pipe tightly with Carter Hall tobacco, and with a match or a silver butane lighter, there'd be a flame and a puff and a flame and a puff, and soon the pipe was going, and I'd see gray wisps of smoke heading out into the air, and I'd hear the locusts in the background, and I would open the Carter Hall pouch, and I would see the brown leafy tobacco, and I would hold it up to my nose and take a deep breath of sugary sweetness. And it seemed as if this would be the way that it was forever. And then one day, the radiologist was looking at the chest x-ray and said, "That spot shouldn't be there." And then the spot got a little bigger and a little bigger, and there were more visits to the doctor, and Grandpa got smaller and smaller and less sinewy and less muscular. And the knucklehead, bookish grandson would like to think that he was helpful, but he wasn't. He was squeamish, and he stood back and did nothing, while Grandma was the one who held the basin into which Grandpa coughed up the things that the bookish grandson wasn't ready to see. And Grandpa got smaller and smaller, and one day he was in the bathroom, and he just couldn't make it out by himself, and he just sat down on the end of the tub. And Grandma was panicking, and the grandson was panicking, and they were helpless. And so the grandson called the ambulance. The ambulance driver came along, and this driver came in, and he wasn't that big, but he had sinewy muscles. And he threaded one arm under my grandfather's right armpit and across his shoulder blades and under the left armpit, and he took hold, and he threaded one arm under my grandpa's knees, and he lifted him up. And I watched this stranger carry my grandfather like a child and set him down in the gurney. And a few more months passed, and then Grandpa was dead. Now, as I said, I have this very, very bad habit. I have this habit of thinking that the way things are now are the way things will always be. And I thought those summer days on the porch will always be that way, and Grandpa will always be here, the strong man. And so, unfortunately, I took him for granted, and I simply took what he had to give, and I never took the time to actually learn how to love him properly. And so I found myself at a funeral trying to will up the tears to well up, and the tears never came. And so I have this very bad habit of thinking things will always be as they are and taking them for granted, and it's not a habit that I recommend. If you have things in your life, if you have people in your life who are of value, I urge you to remember that you will not have them forever. So love them and treasure them. And thanks, and welcome to the corner.